My name is Arthur Vance. For the past 15 years, I've made my living with my hands, here in the quiet, damp air of Port Blossom, Washington. My workshop, a converted carriage house behind our old craftsman home, smells perpetually of cedar shavings, tung oil, and the faint, metallic scent of my sharpening stones. I restore things. I take fractured, forgotten pieces of furniture, a splintered rocking chair that held 3 generations of babies, a water-stained writing desk where a family's fortunes were pinned, and I find the grain beneath the grime. I listen to the stories held in the wood and, with patience, help them speak again. It's a slow, deliberate life, one that finds its rhythm in the seasons, in the drip of rain on the moss-covered roof, and in the steady scrape of a hand playing over a piece of cherry wood. I thought it was a life Isabel loved, too. We met in Seattle, a world away from here, during a brief, misguided foray of mine into the corporate sphere. I was a junior graphic designer, drowning in a sea of gray cubicles and forced enthusiasm. She was a whirlwind in the marketing department, sharp and incandescent, with a laugh that could cut through the dull hum of the office. She said she was drawn to my stillness, my quiet way of observing the world. "You're like an anchor, Art," she'd say, her hand on my arm. "You keep me from floating away." I was drawn to her fire. She saw potential everywhere, in every person, every idea. She moved with a kinetic energy that I found both exhilarating and exhausting. When I told her I was leaving the city, leaving the corporate ladder to reclaim a life of tangible creation, she didn't hesitate. She saw it as a romantic adventure. We bought the old house in Port Blossom, a place with good bones, but years of neglect. For the first few years, it felt like our shared project. I'd spend my days in the workshop, and she'd commute to her new, high-powered job at a tech firm downtown, Ascend Dynamics. In the evenings, we'd strip wallpaper, sand floors, and dream about the garden we'd plant in the spring. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, a dissonance crept in. My quiet life became, in her vocabulary, a static one. My love for restoration became a fixation on the past. Her work at Ascend became her entire world. The late-night meetings bled into work retreats, which bled into networking weekends, with her colleague, Damien. He was everything I wasn't: slick, ambitious, fluent in the language of disruption and scalability. His name began to pepper her stories, a recurring character in a life I was no longer a part of. The easy intimacy we'd shared curdled into a kind of polite performance. She stopped asking about my projects, and I stopped asking about her weekends, because I feared the answers I might find in the subtle hesitation before she spoke. Love, I've learned, doesn't vanish in a thunderclap. It erodes, like a riverbank, worn away by 1,000 tiny, unspoken resentments until, one day, you look up and realize the landscape of your life is irrevocably changed. I saw it happening. I felt the ground giving way beneath my feet, but I held on, believing my anchor was strong enough for both of us. I believed in the promises we'd etched into the bones of our home. The text message arrived on a Tuesday night. It was late October, and a persistent drizzle was tapping against the workshop windows. I was applying a final coat of wax to a beautiful old roll-top desk, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the deep, warm glow of the tiger oak. My phone buzzed on the workbench, a sharp, electronic intrusion into my analog world. It was a photo. Isabel, radiant in a slinky white dress, raising a champagne flute. Beside her, Damien, his arm possessively around her waist, grinned at the camera. They were backlit by the gaudy neon glow of a Las Vegas wedding chapel. Beneath the image, a single line of text: "Just married Damien. Finally with someone who wants to live, not just exist. Sorry you're so pathetic." The words didn't detonate. They seeped. A slow, cold poison that worked its way through my veins, chilling me from the inside out. I set down my polishing cloth, my hand steady, though the world had just tilted on its axis. I looked at the desk, its 100-year-old wood, a testament to endurance, to history, to promises kept. Then I looked at the glowing screen in my hand, a portal to a cheap, disposable future. Pathetic. The word hung in the quiet air of my workshop. Was it pathetic to love the scent of old wood? To find joy in the patient mending of what is broken? To believe that an anchor was a symbol of strength, not stagnation? For a long time, I did nothing. I simply stood there, the smell of wax and wood filling my lungs, and let the pain wash over me. It was a physical sensation, a hollowing out in my chest. I thought of her laughter filling the hallways of our home. I thought of her sleeping beside me, her breath a soft rhythm in the night. I thought of the garden we never quite finished. All of it, a life's work, reduced to a ghost story in a single, cruel text. There was no rage. Not then. Just a profound and bottomless sorrow. But as the minutes turned into an hour, something else began to surface. A quiet, clear thought that cut through the fog of grief. An anchor doesn't just hold you in place. It also marks the boundary of where your safe harbor ends and the dangerous, open sea begins. She hadn't just left. She had tried to scuttle the ship, to mock the very idea of the harbor. And in that moment, I knew I had to pull up the anchor. Not to chase her, but to save myself. My first call wasn't to a lawyer, but to my sister, Nina. She's a financial planner in Portland, pragmatic and fiercely protective. I read her the text, my voice cracking on the last word. She was silent for a moment, and then her voice came through the line, calm and resolute. Okay, Art. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But we're not going to fall apart. We're going to be smart. Are you at your computer? Over the next 2 hours, guided by Nina's steady voice, I began the sorrowful, methodical task of dismantling the life we had built together. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like emotional triage. Each action was a necessary stitch to close a wound. First, the joint savings and checking, Nina said. The bank has a 24-hour fraud line. Her marrying someone else while still married to you, and immediately after a significant withdrawal for a work trip, is a legitimate red flag. You're not freezing her out. You're protecting shared marital assets from unauthorized use. I spoke to a woman named Sophia at the bank, my voice low, and even as I explained the situation. I forwarded her the photo and the text. There was a pause, then a quiet, "I understand, Mr. Vance. I am flagging the accounts for review and placing a temporary hold. You'll need to come in tomorrow to sign some paperwork." One stitch. Next were the credit cards. One by one, I logged into the online portals. I saw the charges from the past few days, the flight to Vegas, a suite at the Bellagio, a lavish dinner at a place with a French name, a charge from a designer boutique. All on our shared account. All for a life that didn't include me. With each click of the mouse, I reported the cards as compromised and requested new ones be issued only in my name. It was a strange, disembodied process, reducing years of shared expenses, groceries, movie tickets, anniversary dinners to a series of fraudulent transactions. Another stitch. The house. Art. Nina's voice was gentle now. I know this is hard, but she made her choice. You need to secure your home. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling, I called a locksmith. A kind-faced man named Henry arrived, his truck filled with the jangling tools of his trade. As he drilled out the old lock on the front door, the sound echoed through the silent house. It felt like a violation, an exorcism. He handed me a set of new, gleaming brass keys. They felt heavy and foreign in my hand. When I closed the newly secured door behind him, the solid, definitive thud of the deadbolt sliding home was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. The days that followed passed in a blur of quiet activity. I met with a lawyer, a sharp, compassionate woman named Ms. Davies who looked over our prenuptial agreement. It was something Isabel had insisted on when we married, a practical measure she'd said, given her soaring career at Ascend. I had found it clinical and sad at the time, but now I felt a flood of gratitude for her foresight. It clearly stipulated that in the event of infidelity, the house which I had purchased with an inheritance from my grandfather before we were married remained my sole property. Ms. Davies's advice was simple and clear. You've done nothing wrong, Arthur. You have acted to protect your financial stability in the face of marital abandonment and potential fraud. Do not engage with her. Do not respond to any attempts at contact. Let the legal process do its work. Focus on your own. Her words gave me a strange sense of peace. I retreated to my workshop, the one place that still felt entirely my own. I turned on the lights, the familiar hum of the ballast a comforting sound. I ran my hand over the roll-top desk, now finished and glowing. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply drawn a line. I had protected the integrity of my own life, just as I protected the integrity of this old wood. I spent the day sanding a new piece of maple, the rhythmic motion a kind of meditation. With every pass of the sandpaper, I felt like I was smoothing down the raw, jagged edges of my own heart. The first call came that evening. An unknown number from Nevada. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a frantic, sputtering tirade from Isabel. Art, what the hell is going on? My card was just declined at the hotel. I tried the other one, same thing. What did you do? This is insane. Call me back right now. Her voice was tight with panic and entitlement. There was no apology, no remorse, just indignation. It was the voice of a person who had just discovered the consequences of their own actions. I deleted the message without a second thought. The police arrived 3 days later. It was a Saturday morning, the sky a high, crisp blue after a night of rain. I was in the garden, my hands deep in the cool, damp earth, pulling weeds from around the rose bushes. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive and looked up to see a Port Blossom police cruiser. 2 officers, a man and a woman, walked up the stone path. Their expressions were neutral, professional. I wiped my hands on my jeans and met them at the porch steps. Mr. Arthur Vance? The woman asked. Yes, that's me. We've received a complaint filed from Las Vegas, the male officer said, his eyes scanning the carefully maintained porch, the wind chimes stirring in the breeze. From a Ms. Isabel Croft. She's alleging that you've illegally locked her out of her home and have committed financial abuse by cutting off her access to marital funds. I nodded slowly, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. I had expected this. Isabel isn't Ms. Croft anymore, I said quietly. Her name is whatever Damien's last name is now. And this isn't her home. She abandoned it. I invited them inside. The house was quiet and clean. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I made them coffee, my hands moving with practiced ease. We sat at the small kitchen table I'd built from reclaimed Douglas fir. I understand why you're here. I began, my voice even. And I want to be completely transparent. I laid it all out for them. Not with anger or a desire for retribution, but with a weary sadness. I showed them the text message, the photo. I explained that she had called it a work retreat, but had used thousands of dollars from our joint account to fund an elopement with her coworker. I explained that my actions weren't punitive, they were protective. I was securing marital assets that were being actively misappropriated. She chose to end our marriage and begin a new one, I said, looking from one officer to the other. That choice has financial and legal consequences. I have simply acknowledged that reality. As for locking her out, I sighed, gesturing around the sunlit kitchen. This house is legally and solely mine, as stipulated in a prenuptial agreement she herself drafted. She is welcome to her personal belongings, of course. She just needs to arrange a time with my lawyer to retrieve them. The female officer looked at the text message on my phone again, her expression softening with something that looked like sympathy. She didn't mention a new marriage or a prenup in her report. I'm not surprised, I said. The truth is often more complicated than the story we want to tell. They finished their coffee, thanked me for my time, and left. There were no threats, no accusations. Just a quiet understanding that this was a civil matter, a tragic and messy end to a marriage, not a criminal act. As I watched their car pull away, I didn't feel a sense of victory. I just felt tired. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of peace. The boundary was holding. She arrived the following Tuesday. I was in the workshop, listening to a classical station on the old radio, when I heard a car door slam, followed by a furious pounding on the front door of the house. I watched from the workshop window. It was Isabel, her face blotchy and swollen with rage. Behind her, looking profoundly uncomfortable, was Damien. He lingered by their rental car, a sleek, soulless silver sedan that looked completely out of place in our quiet, tree-lined street. Arthur, I know you're in there, you coward. Open this door right now. You have no right to do this to me. Her voice, shrill and accusatory, was a jarring intrusion into the peaceful afternoon. I walked from the workshop to the house, my boots crunching on the gravel. I didn't open the main door. I spoke to her through the closed screen door, a fine mesh separating her world of chaos from my world of quiet order. She looked different. The incandescent spark I had once loved was gone, replaced by a hard, brittle anger. Vegas had not been kind to her. Isabel, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This isn't your house anymore. Half of everything in there is mine. My clothes, my books, my life. You can't just lock me out, she shrieked, her fists clenched. You chose to leave that life, I said, my gaze steady. You can have your things. Ms. Davies has been trying to contact you to arrange a time. You haven't returned her calls. I'm not dealing with some lawyer. I'm dealing with you. My husband. I'm not your husband, Isabel, I said, and the words, spoken aloud, were both a final ending and a new beginning. Damien is. This is between you and him now. Have him take care of you. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, panic, maybe, or the sudden, terrifying realization that her safety net was gone. She glanced back at Damien, who took an involuntary step away from the house, his hands shoved in his pockets. He looked like a man who had signed up for a thrilling affair and had just been handed the bill for a messy, complicated divorce. She turned back to me, her anger dissolving into a desperate plea. Art, please. I have nowhere to go. My accounts. They're all empty. And there it was. The heart of it. It wasn't about love or respect or the life we had built. It was about the convenience I had provided, the stability she had taken for granted and then tried to burn to the ground on her way out. A deep, quiet sadness settled over me. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I truly was. I was sorry for the woman she had become and for the man I had been, the one who had enabled her for so long. But that is not my problem to solve. You need to leave, Isabel. I closed the main door, the click of the latch echoing in the hallway. I leaned against it, my eyes closed, and listened as her shouting slowly faded into broken sobs. And then, finally, the sound of the rental car speeding away. The silence that descended was not empty. It was full of possibility. It was the sound of my own life, waiting for me. The months that followed were a time of quiet rebuilding. The legalities unfolded with a slow, predictable rhythm, managed entirely by Miss Davies. The annulment from Damien was complicated by their financial entanglements and Ascend Dynamics, a company that prized its public image, unceremoniously fired them both. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved back to California within a month. Isabel, facing a fraud investigation from the bank and several creditors, ended up moving in with her sister in Idaho. I never heard from her directly again. One day, a moving truck arrived, and two men, armed with a list provided by her lawyer, carefully packed her belongings. I stayed in the workshop, the sounds of their work a distant, final echo of our shared life. When they were gone, the house felt lighter. I walked through the rooms, and for the first time, they felt completely mine. I started with the garden. I dug up the overgrown flower beds, my muscles aching with the good, clean work of it. I planted new roses, sturdy and resilient, in a small vegetable patch. As I worked the soil, turning it over, enriching it, I felt like I was doing the same for my own soul. I was clearing out the weeds of resentment and bitterness, and planting the seeds of something new. My work in the shop took on a new meaning. I wasn't just restoring old furniture. I was restoring myself. I found an old, broken-down writing desk at a flea market, its veneer peeling, one of its legs shattered. It was a wreck, but I saw the good bones beneath the damage. I spent weeks on it, patiently stripping away the old finish, mending the broken leg with a carefully crafted piece of walnut, sanding the surfaces until they were as smooth as silk. It was a meditation on healing. You can't erase the damage, the scars, the history, but you can integrate them. You can strengthen what is broken and create something new, something beautiful, not in spite of its history, but because of it. One evening, nearly a year later, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and the sweet fragrance of the night-blooming jasmine I had planted. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered it anyway. Hello. A woman's voice, hesitant and small, came through the line. Arthur. It was Isabel. Her voice was stripped of its old confidence, its sharp, metallic edge. It was just a voice. Yes. I know you have no reason to talk to me. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. The words sounded difficult, as if they had traveled a long way to be spoken. For everything. For how I ended it. For what I said. It was cruel. You didn't deserve that. I listened to the sound of her breathing on the other end of the line. I thought of all the things I could say, the anger I could unleash, the pain I could remind her of. But I felt none of it. The wound had scarred over, and the scar was no longer tender. It was just a part of me now. Thank you for saying that, Isabel, I said, my voice quiet. I appreciate it. I'm in a program, she said, her voice a little stronger. I'm working on myself. trying to understand why I do the things I do. That's good, I said. I wish you well with that. I truly do. And I meant it. Her healing was her own journey now, just as mine was mine. We had reached a place beyond blame, a quiet shore of acceptance. We said our goodbyes, two strangers who had once known every secret of each other's hearts. I hung up the phone and looked out at the garden, at the house I had filled with light and life again. I felt no triumph, no lingering bitterness, just a quiet, expansive peace. The past is like an old piece of wood. It has its knots, its cracks, its imperfections. You can't change the grain, but you can choose what you do with it. You can let it rot, or you can sand it down, find its hidden beauty, and build something strong and new, something that can stand on its own.